Willy Wonka's ship is about to dock on land as he sings that after 7 years at sea, sailing, it's time to show the world his chocolate recipes. He arrives then at the town where he wants to start his own chocolate shop. This city that he's pinned 7 years of his hopes onto with 12 coins and a dream. He runs out of money on the first day pretty quickly, mostly because he is really generous and kind of a bleeding heart, and he does run into people who need help. Because of this, on his first evening, he decides that he's going to sleep on a bench, but it's freezing out, so a man takes him to a woman named Mrs. Screwbit, who runs the local laundromat and guest house. Mrs. Screwbit has adopted a little girl named Noodle, who tries to warn Willy to read the fine print on the contract that he has to sign to stay for the evening, but Noodle is quickly shut down by Mrs. Screwbit. We'll also learn later that Willy can't read. The next day, Willy makes a presentation to the city's people, showing them the magic tricks that he can do with his chocolates. This particular chocolate makes the eater hover above the ground. It's quite the affair, but the members of the chocolate cartel, this corporate outfit in town that has a monopoly on chocolate, come out to sample his wares, and they declare it the worst chocolate in the world. Wonka is disappointed at first because these are his chocolate-making heroes, but ever the optimist, that does not keep him down for long. The next day, when he tries to settle his bill for the one-night stay, Mrs. Screwbit tells him that he's incurred a few other costs, so his overall bill will cost a lot more than the single coin that he has. Remember the contract that he wasn't able to read? Well, yes, it was pretty much a trap. She charged him for warming his hands by the fire, the glass of gin that she offered him the night before, the fact that he used the soap, and the stairs. Nonsense charges, but that's on the contract which he signed. So now he owes 10,000 coins, or 10,000 sovereigns, they call them. He's going to have to work off this debt in the laundry's wash house. He's shoved down a tunnel to the underground room where an already existing group of people there suffered the same fate. They got conned by Mrs. Screwbit as well, they couldn't pay, and so they are working their debts off. The lot of them, including Willy, is locked down there as laborers. So Willy can't read because he spent all of his time focused on making chocolate. Noodle comes to see him then, and he tells her about his mom, who would bring home a single cacao bean, and after a while they'd collected enough cacao beans to make a single bar of chocolate. As for Noodle's story, she was adopted by Mrs. Screwbit, but they ended up charging her for that as well. She owes Mrs. Screwbit 20,000 sovereigns. She's also never tasted chocolate, and Willy makes some for her. He offers her a lifetime supply of chocolate in exchange for smuggling them out of there. As the two get to know each other, we also learn that it was actually Willy and his mother's shared dream to open up a chocolate shop, but unfortunately she fell sick soon after and she passed away. So he's carrying on this dream partly to feel close to her. Meanwhile, the chief of police goes to a secret underground bunker. We find out then that the corporate chocolatiers are threatened by Wonka already, in large part because this chocolate is affordable enough for poor people to buy as well. So the chocolate cartel bribes the chief of police with chocolate to get rid of Wonka, to warn him that if he continues to sell chocolate, he will have an unfortunate accident. At first, the chief of police doesn't want to. He says he can't just go about threatening their competition, but he also has a terrible sweet tooth, and they eventually wear him down. Willy talks Mrs. Screwbit's muscle, basically, into taking a bath and freshening up because Mrs. Screwbit is actually in love with him. Willy's goal here is to try to keep them both distracted so that Willy and Noodle can make their escape and get some giraffe milk that he needs for his latest chocolate creation. But the police catch them when they're back in the city. The officer, who keeps dunking Willy's head into water, warns him not to sell chocolate in town. He admits that he doesn't want to do this to Wonka, but he has to on account of the chocolate cartel. Willy's co-inhabitants, the laborers at the house, offer their different skill sets to help Willy set up his chocolate shop and evade the police. Noodle also takes it upon herself to teach Willy how to read. One of the men, Mr. Crunch, tells Willy that he was once Mr. Slugworth, one of the chocolatiers, his accountant, and he made a discovery while working for him. The chocolate cartel have been watering down their chocolate and storing the excess in a secret vault underneath the cathedral. This was the secret vault that we saw the chief of police go to. Earlier in the movie, Willy had mentioned to Noodle that someone kept stealing his chocolate at night while he slept. He eventually sets a trap and we find out that it's an Oompa Loompa. He tells Willy that Willy started it all by stealing their cacao beans back in Loompa Land. Willy doesn't remember this, so the Oompa Loompa sings the story to him, that he was guarding the beans on Loompa Island when Willy stole some of them. This Oompa Loompa had actually fallen asleep on guarding duty, and so he was banished from the island until he could pay the rest of the Oompa Loompas back times 1,000. The Oompa Loompa then tricks Willy into letting him out of the jar, hits him over the head with a frying pan, and makes off with Willy's last jar of chocolate. The next day, Noodle presents Willy with the keys to the shop that he's been dreaming of. It's a real fixer-upper, but they manage it. And in any case, they can afford it for 1 week, and this means that the police won't be able to bother them because legally they aren't committing any crimes by selling in an actual shop. The chocolate cartel, meanwhile, is still keeping tabs on them. Mr. Slugworth then goes to Mrs. Screwbit and asks if she'd be able to help him put a stop to Willy's chocolate business. Willy finally opens the shop and it's quite magical at first until he discovers that there's an error in the manufacturing. Somebody poisoned the batch, which causes people to grow different colored hair and their faces turn different colors. People start sabotaging the store, angry at being cheated and being poisoned. The shop is destroyed as Mr. Slugworth looks on. Willy is really down after this, in large part because his mother never came to him. She'd promised that she'd be there with him when he finally opened his store, and he really believed that she somehow would be. Mr. Slugworth and the cartel come to the store then and admit that they were the ones responsible for the sabotage. They offer Willy a deal then. They'll pay off everybody's debts to Mrs. Screwbit and even enough money for Noodle to start a whole new life. All they want from Willy is that he leave town and never make chocolate again. The chocolate cartel sees him off with a one-way boat ticket to the North Pole. On the way there, he bumps into the Oompa Loompa who tells him there's no way he could take that ridiculous deal. Willy feels like he has to do it for Noodle, but then he discovers something. When Slugworth shook his hand, his ring left a mark. A name, an A surrounded by an S, Arthur Slugworth. Noodle has a ring just like it, a Slugworth family ring. Just as Willy is about to escape the boat because Noodle might be in danger, he catches that the cartel meant to actually blow it up with him on it and not have him transported to the North Pole. While the cartel is happy that they've finally gotten rid of him, seeing the boat blow up, they don't actually see Willy on the boat when it does. Back at the wash house, Mrs. Screwbit prepares for the release of the others, but she tells Noodle that the money she got for her was to keep her there. They can't have little urchins running about. Noodle is locked in again until Willy and the others come to break her out. Willy says that since there are records of the cartel's crimes in a ledger in a vault, that's all they need to prove that he's a criminal. He and the cartel will be put in jail and the group will finally be free. So they plan a heist. And after a search, Noodle finds the green ledger, but Mr. Slugworth catches them. That's when Willy reveals that he's family with Noodle. She has the exact same ring that he has, the Slugworth family ring that her parents once gave her. Slugworth says then that Noodle's ring belonged to his brother, Zebedee. He was a hopeless romantic who fell in love with a commoner but died before he could marry, and so the family fortune was left to Arthur. 9 months later, Noodle's mother came to Arthur's doorstep asking for money for Noodle's medication. He said he would take care of her, but instead he put her down a laundry chute, and that's how Mrs. Screwbit found her. Also, the letter on the necklace was never an N for Noodle, but a Z for Zebedee. When Noodle's mom, Dorothy Smith, came back for her, Arthur lied and said that she died. Arthur confiscates the green ledger from Willy and Noodle, and he intends to drown them in chocolate, a death by chocolate. Before they leave, Willy gives Arthur a jar of chocolate, asking him to give them to the Oompa Loompa. That was his remaining debt, remember? The cartel decides to eat all of the chocolate instead, and of course, when the Oompa Loompa finds out that something has been stolen from him, he decides to get even, he pulls all the levers, and this saves Willy and Noodle from drowning. The pair make it out and gives the ledger to the non-corrupt police, and Willy also lets out the excess chocolate that the cartel has been hoarding into a fountain in the middle of the city. He also finds his mother's secret then, that she couldn't tell him before he died. It's not the chocolate that matters, it's the people you share it with. Eventually, the group manage to track down Noodle's mom, who works at the library in town. Noodle and her mother reunite. Willy pays the rest of his debt off to the Loompa, but also tells them that he'd be looking for somebody to head up his tasting department at the chocolate factory, as they both let their imaginations run wild with Willy's new creations. And yeah, that is the movie Wonka. Thank you for watching.